So let me just say a couple quick things, because I think it's been fascinating as Clifton and I have crisscrossed the state listening to people, and people talk about, what can we do about jobs? And I keep reminding them that we know what to do about jobs. We worked with Ronald Reagan. We worked in the 1990s. We've created jobs. We know how to create an environment where you create jobs. And I want to pick up on what was just said. The first step to creating jobs in America is to defeat Barack Obama. People worry about the crisis of foreclosures. The fact is, we should repeal the Dodd-Frank bill, which is killing small banks, killing small business, driving down the price of housing. As President, I will ask the new Congress to repeal Obamacare starting on the 3rd of January, to not go home. Once they come in on the 3rd of January, to stay in session. Repeal Obamacare as their first order of business. Repeal Dodd-Frank as their second order of business. Repeal Sarbanes-Oxley as their third order of business. And my goal will be, by January 20th, when I am sworn in, to have 3 bills delivered to my desk that I can sign the very first day to get us off on the right track and prove that we are serious about changing Washington. Now, so if repealing Dodd-Frank is going to help the price of housing and help with the housing market, the first thing you have to do to get to the repeal of Dodd-Frank is defeat Barack Obama. It's very straightforward. But let me remind you, the way our Constitution works, the presidency by itself is not enough. So I would be committed to running a team election this fall. I would seek to elect every Republican to the House and the Senate, which means here we have to replace Bill Nelson with a conservative. We've done this before. I worked in the 1980 campaign and helped chair the first Capitol Steps event ever held in September of 1980. We brought all the candidates together with Governor Reagan. We had 5 major issues. As a result of the momentum that came out of that, we won 6 U.S. Senate seats by a total margin of 75,000 votes. We took control of the Senate when nobody expected it. We picked up 33 House seats. I worked in the 1984 campaign where President Reagan got reelected with 49 states. I was actually part of a truth squad in San Francisco. We'd have a press conference every morning, and we'd talk about what the Democrats were doing wrong. Many of you remember that in his acceptance speech on Wednesday night, Walter Mondale said, "The other guy is going to raise taxes, but he won't tell you. But I promise you, if you elect me, I will raise your taxes." We closed down our press operation. We were following a Woodrow Wilson rule that you should never murder a man who's in the process of committing suicide. And we didn't want to confuse the American people. We just wanted them to watch Walter Mondale. And it worked. I helped participate in 1988 when George H.W. Bush was behind by 19 points in May and won the presidency in November by 6 points. That's a 25-point swing, one out of every 4 Americans, and I would argue intellectually that that was Ronald Reagan's 3rd campaign. That the fact is, we designed a campaign against Dukakis, which communicated vividly to the American people that he was a Massachusetts liberal, and as a result, people voted for the person that they thought was the conservative. It was a deliberate strategy to have Bush over here on the right and Dukakis as far over on the left as possible. Because I believe if you get involved with moderates, you're too close to the Democrat. You cannot win a fight where the elite media is going to be biased against you. We tried a moderate strategy in 1996 and it failed. We tried a moderate strategy in 2008 and it failed. In order to win a debate with somebody like Barack Obama, when you know that the New York Times and all the networks are going to be for him, you have to be far enough apart that he can't get to you. Ronald Reagan did this brilliantly in 1980. Ronald Reagan was 30 points behind in January and carried more states in November than Franklin Roosevelt carried against Herbert Hoover in 1932. And the reason was people came to see the difference. So, for example, I'm going to campaign on an American energy policy of creating American energy for American jobs and for American national security. I can summarize it in a very simple phrase. Never again should an American president bow to a Saudi king, period. Now, that is a 79-16 issue. And if you have an articulate candidate who is confident and who knows what they're talking about, who takes the 79, even when the New York Times is done and the networks are done, you're still at 65. What you can't do is get involved in a fight that's between 52 and 48 because they can pull you into defeat. I've told people again and again, and the data bears it out totally. Having worked with Reagan, having worked as Speaker of the House, I have a very clear understanding of how to create jobs. Lower taxes, less regulation, more American energy, and respect and help the people who create jobs. It's the opposite of Obamaism. Obamaism is higher taxes, more regulations, anti-American energy, and class warfare against the people who create jobs. So I believe it's fair to say that one of the central themes of the fall campaign is going to be that we will be the party of jobs and paychecks and independence. They will be the party of unemployment, food stamps, and dependence. Obama is the best food stamp president in American history. I would like to be the best paycheck president in American history. The difference is very profound. The fact is, you can go to every neighborhood of every ethnic background in this country, go door to door and ask people, would you rather your children had a paycheck and a job or food stamps and dependence? And 80% of them are going to say, you know, I'd like my children to be able to work and have a job and be independent. So we have potentially a base. I'm asking for the Republican nomination. We will run an American campaign. I want every American of every background. If you agree with us, we should have energy independence and not bow to the Saudis. We want you to join us no matter what your party background. If you agree with us that you would like to have a paycheck and a job, we would like you to be with us no matter what your background. This is about building a new grand coalition of Americans who come together because they want to create a country where we unleash the spirit of the American people and rebuild the country that we love. That is what 2012 is all about. We're also going to have debates where we draw it very clear. I am for the Declaration of Independence. He's for the writing of Saul Alinsky. I am for the Constitution. He is for European socialism. I am for the Federalist Papers. He is for a whole series of bureaucratic controls over our life, which are a fundamental violation of the Constitution. Let's just get it on. Everybody in America who thinks we ought to be Europe, you have a candidate. There ain't many of them outside of college faculties. And everybody else, you have a candidate. This will be the most dynamic and clearest election in modern history. And we will have an extraordinary opportunity. And people say to me, okay, but can you be practical? This always kind of surprises me. Because they'll run in and say, you know, can you be practical about getting this done? Well, I was there in '81. And the fact is that we had to get 1/3 of the Democrats in the House in order to pass Reagan's program. And we did. Clifton and I did a movie on Reagan. We went out to the ranch and we saw the table where in August he signed the tax cuts. And it worked. As Speaker of the House, I had to get Bill Clinton's signature. I could make speeches forever. But if I wanted to get something done, I had to get his signature. If he wanted to get something done, he had to get me to schedule it. Pretty tough negotiating. And we ended up with welfare reform. 2 out of every 3 people went back to work or went to school. Child poverty declined as parents earned a living. We passed the first tax cut in 16 years, the largest capital gains tax cut in history, and the result was unemployment dropped to 4.2%. 11 million new jobs were created. We then signed in 1997 the Balanced Budget Act. For 4 consecutive years, we balanced the budget, paid off $405 billion in debt, and the only 4 years of your lifetime that we have balanced the budget. We insisted on plussing up the intelligence system by $1 billion. The 9/11 Commission called it the Gingrich plus-up and said it was the only time in the 90s that the intelligence community got more money. And George Tenet, the director of the CIA, said without it, the system would have broken down. So you can get these things done. So how fast will it turn around? Late on election night, when it is obvious that Obama has been defeated, people will start changing their investment strategies as of that night. With your help, we will elect a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and that means that they will stay in session on January 3rd, and we will begin passing repeal legislation on January 4th, 5th, and 6th, because everybody will know what's coming. We're not sitting around and going, gee, what should we do? We're going to spend the entire time from the election to January getting the bills ready, getting them designed, getting it all put together. Now, when we get to the first day of the presidency, I will sign a series of executive orders. They will all be published by October 1st. They'll be very clear. The first executive order I'm going to sign will abolish all of the White House czars as of that moment. One of the initial executive orders will instruct the State Department to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem as of that day. And let me say about the Keystone Pipeline, an action which tells you how totally out of touch with reality this president is. We have a chance to build a pipeline that makes perfect sense geologically, skip the mountains, come straight down, go to Houston, do it through the United States, create 20 to 50,000 construction jobs. For the next 50 years, have jobs in Houston and Galveston, processing the oil and shipping the oil. And this president vetoes it on behalf of left-wing environmental extremists in San Francisco. It is a totally destructive and dangerous position. It weakens our energy resources, and it sends a signal to the Canadians to form that they are better off to have a partnership with China, building the pipeline due west in Canada to Vancouver and shipping to China, than they are trying to have a partnership with the United States. Well, I want to say publicly, so the Canadians can understand how to schedule. On the 20th of January, I will sign an executive order opening up the pipeline. They can start building it the next day. Those are specific actions. But let me just for a moment take you to a higher point. This is a Lincoln Day dinner. And I want to say something about the party we should be. Not the party we sometimes are, but the party we should be. In 1859, Abraham Lincoln stood at Council Bluffs, Iowa, looked across the Missouri River, and said, we should build a transcontinental railroad. When he said it, we did not have a steel industry big enough to make enough rails. We did not have a locomotive strong enough to cross the Sierra Nevadas. And we didn't have tunneling engineers that were prepared enough to dig the tunnels. 10 years later, in Utah, they drove in the Golden Spike, and the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. But it's a more amazing story than that in terms of the first Republican president. In 1832, at the age of 23, Lincoln runs for the state legislature for the first time. Part of his plank is to build a railroad. Now, the first railroad is built in 1829 by George Stephenson. It's called the Rocket. It's built in Great Britain. The first railroad engine to reach the United States is in 1831. Lincoln has never seen a railroad, but he understands that the prairie's big and walking is slow. And he's read about railroads. And so he campaigned on behalf of progress. Lincoln was somebody who believed in progress. He believed in free markets, entrepreneurs, technology and science, and progress. By 1858, as he is engaged in debates with Douglas, he's riding trains around Illinois. In 1961, a member of the other party, in May, gave a speech. And he said, we will have a man on the moon before the end of the decade. At that time, we did a movie that includes this in it. And we have Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, who says, after we show a clip of Kennedy, at that moment, no American had been in orbit. The only person to orbit the Earth was Yuri Gagarin, a Russian. One American had gone suborbital for 3 hours. That was it. And here's a president saying to the whole world, in this decade, we will invent the rockets, train the astronauts, build the instrumentation, create the organizational structures, and we will be on the moon. How many of you remember July of 1969? How many of you remember how proud you felt to be an American that night? How good it felt to see the American flag on the moon? Ronald Reagan understood the power of technology because he'd lived it. His first jobs were in radio when it was illegal to have radio news because the newspapers convinced the politicians that radio had an unfair advantage because it could deliver instantly. He went to Hollywood when Technicolor was brand new and talkies were only a few years old. He went into television, which had been invented during his lifetime. And so Reagan had this deep instinct. This is the 26th anniversary of the failure of the Challenger and the death of Krista McAuliffe and the other astronauts today. And if you go back and look, and in our Reagan film, we have a section of Reagan talking that night to the nation. He doesn't talk about defeat. He doesn't talk about failure. He doesn't talk about turning back. He talks about heroism, courage, the spirit of pioneering, the desire to move ahead. And he reminds us that it was 390 years earlier on that day that Drake, the great English explorer, had died at sea. And he brought a connection between the age of exploration and the new age of exploration. Several nights ago, on the Space Coast, I outlined a bold, visionary, dramatic opportunity for America. I did it for two very different reasons. One, because we will not turn to our grandchildren and say to them, we are the generation that let the Chinese dominate space, and we're the generation that accepted the decay of the United States because it was just too hard to break out. But there's a second, more positive reason. This is a big country filled with big people. We've always had dreams. We've gone west. We've invented the airplane. We developed the mass-produced car. We built the Panama Canal. We won the entire Second World War in 3 years and 8 months. Think of it. From Pearl Harbor to victory over the Japanese Empire in 44 months. We beat Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan in 44 months. I believe that our problems are not the people. Our problems are not the spirit of America. Our problems are a regulatory, litigation, special interest system in the state capitals, in the city halls, in the county commissions, and in Washington. And I believe we need a movement. So I would just say to you candidly, I came here tonight, I wear, thanks to Gay Gaines, George Washington's Commander-in-Chief pin. This is the flag that flew at Valley Forge in front of his command headquarters. I wear it to remind myself that when the Constitutional Convention met and wrote the term Commander-in-Chief, the person presiding had been Commander-in-Chief for 8 years. He fought the British for 8 years with 1 week at Mount Vernon. So in the tradition of Washington, who was prepared to stake everything, of Lincoln, who believed passionately in freedom and passionately in a better future, candidly of John F. Kennedy, the Democrat, who launched us into space in a way that we should have continued, and finally of Ronald Reagan, a man who had lived change, believed in change, and through his courage defeated the Soviet Empire, the largest empire the world had ever seen, and did it in 8 years. I came tonight to say to you that I will not ask you to be for me for president. Because if you're for me, you're going to vote and go home and say, I sure hope Newt can fix it. And that is not possible. No person, not even the president, not under our Constitution, can get this done. I came here tonight to ask you to be with me, to stand side by side, to remind the Congress, the governor, the state legislature, the city council, the county commission, the school board, to decide that 537 elected officials in Washington can't turn the country around, but millions of Americans who love this country can turn it around with ease. I pledge to you, in the tradition of our founding document, if you help me next Tuesday, and if with your help I become the nominee, and if as nominee we decisively defeat the left at every level, at President, at House, at Senate, and local governments, that I will give you, for as long as I'm allowed to serve, my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. Together, we are going to give our grandchildren the country they deserve, not the country that currently is decaying. Thank you, good luck, and God bless you.